Stop it.
Stop it. All right. So this week on Gospel XL, we're doing a special episode of Mythbusters of what it's like to be in a house church community. And so let's talk about that.
Welcome. We're glad you're here. I'm Sylvia.
And I'm Shane.
And we meet every Friday evening to share what we have learned, what we're doing in our house church community, our spiritual community, and hope that we help you see a bigger gospel as we have in our group. So we're glad that you've joined us tonight.
Yeah. So, hey, welcome. Anything exciting happened last week?
Well, we had different people on the...
Yeah, I heard.
Yeah,
I heard that
we
part.
did.
There was some new people or something?
Yeah.
I was gone, so.
Yeah, you
good.
were. We miss you. We had a good time.
Good.
Yeah.
Good. Hope you guys saw it as well. If you didn't, know that you can just scroll down on our Facebook page and catch up on any episodes that you might have missed or rewatch some of your old favorites. This is show number, no idea. No idea. So wanted to say a big number, but you'd probably count it and go, that's not true. That's a myth.
That's a myth.
Yeah.
Don't add to the myths.
Don't add to the myths.
No.
One of the things that we continue to encourage you each week is to engage with what we're doing. To engage in during the live feed, but also if you are watching this afterwards, to throw it in the comments, throw some questions. We'll try to address some of those. We're not here to do necessarily just, hey, these are the experts, question and answer with the experts on life in general. We really want to keep this specific to what we're learning in our spiritual community and the journey that we've been on together for about 3 years, right? I think it's been about...
Yeah, a little over.
Little over there.
Yep.
Holy buckets. Jeepers. So this week we did want to talk about some of the myths and misconceptions of a house church and spiritual community. If you have had similar experiences that we have, both of us have come from a fairly strong denomination that really valued. This is not a derogatory term, but I can't think of a better term just to say big church. I don't know what you would. What's another way you would call that? Just your typical average church, I guess.
Yeah.
Just the once a week kind of meeting you go to where you all gather together, and it's a very traditional. Depends
Always has
on
the same routine, and you can pretty much go from one church to another church and have it feel pretty much the same.
Yeah. I'm sure no matter what your denomination is, what your spiritual heritage is, in that you can find that same thing, play out in whatever. So I remember thinking about and not being really exposed very much to this idea of the house church community kind of a deal, and thinking, this is going to sound bad again. I don't mean it bad, but it sounds bad. That's like homeschool for people who can't do big church, who can't do the real thing.
That's one of the myths.
That's one of the myths. That's definitely a myth. So I have learned, maybe that was kind of your experience. That's kind of a weird thing that people kind of on the outskirts do, and I really don't know much about it. So we wanted to. We don't have a lot of them, and there's a whole bunch of it. We don't have a really big list, but we want to just talk about some of these things and kind of open it up so you understand where we're coming from and the environment that we've been learning in and growing in. And so without further ado, I'm going to let you start. Unless you got something else that we need to say before. Okay, good. Go. Roll with the myths. Myth number one is
that it is either ultra-conservative or off-the-boat heresy.
That's right.
No connection with truth. Yeah.
Yes. And so how is that? And we're speaking from our experience. We can't say this for every house church community that's out there. But for our church, and we think we're kind of just an average house church community. So how is that different How has our experience been different than ultra-conservative or off-the-boat heresy?
Well, we're kind of in the middle, I would say, because we're relying on the Bible. We haven't thrown out the Bible. We read the Bible every week. We study the stories, look for what it has to tell us. We're not ultra-conservative in our culture. We don't even talk or worry too much about that part. It's more, how are you connecting with Jesus, and how are you learning about God and growing in your relationship with God?
Yeah. And I guess let's try to define that word a little bit, because that's fairly loaded, the word conservative. It doesn't have to be a negative word. So I would say, I guess the idea to replace conservative, it's not one word, but we don't focus on what you can't do.
Yeah.
Right? Because there are some people in our group that live fairly conservative lifestyles.
Sure.
They're not out, doing crazy things, however you want to define conservative.
Yeah. But we're not, that's not, as a spiritual community, that's not a focus or even generally a conversation.
Yeah.
So, the culture in the group, even though there are conservative people, the culture in the group isn't so conservative because it's not our focus, and it's not something that we spend a lot of time even talking about.
Yeah, I think that's good. And then the other side, the heresy side, what are we doing? You mentioned reading the Bible, but you can read the Bible and come up with some really weird things as well.
So some of the ways.
How are we not going way off, and believing that a spaceship is going to come and take us because of what we read somewhere in Joel or whatever, and so I don't know.
I mean, we've talked about this on some of the other episodes. How do we study the Bible? And we study it, first and foremost, Jesus said that I and the Father are one. Mm-hmm. And so we take him as the best reflection of God. Yeah. So if we see something in the Bible elsewhere that doesn't really match up to what we saw displayed in the life of Christ, then go, wow, there's probably something else going on.
Yeah.
So that's one way that we're not really getting carried away while we study the Bible. And it's always a focus on what kind of God is this? It's not what's going to happen next year in the world. Mm-hmm. Let's read it and try and figure it out. Yeah. So that's not our focus. Our focus is always on gospel, learning to know the message,
the good news of what God is. And I think another thing that we have is we really value the input of all of our members. And not only do we try to focus on, what is it that Jesus said and what is he laying down for us, we try our best to listen to the Holy Spirit and understand that he has a role to play in what we're doing. But he also speaks through all of us as a group, and we really value that and allow people to throw ideas out. It doesn't have to be right. That's the thing. Mm-hmm. When you believe that you have a big enough God that can lead the ship, whatever your community is, when you believe you have a God that's big enough to lead that, you don't have to worry about saying the wrong things, because God's going to lead that. And if it is not necessarily correct, you're going to have some loving rebuke. You're going to have some loving redirection, and people are going to be able to say, hey, I understand what you're saying here, but is that what it says? And we try to be open to that idea, that together we get a more clear picture rather than just...
more clear.
Yeah.
More
we're
clear.
Still not... We still don't have...
Right, because, when you look at some of the beliefs that through the ages that people have had about what God was doing and what he wanted, I think God has many times allowed himself to be totally misunderstood and still work with people. So I don't think it's that. He will only lead and guide if you have it totally understood.
Yeah, correct. Yeah. And
it may not be... It may never be corrected back to exactly, until we see him then we'll know him
Yeah.
as he is. So
And the freedom that we have in the community is that we're okay with it.
Yeah.
And we think that it seems from the stories that you can read in Scripture and the way He works in our lives that God is okay with that too. That He's okay with the misunderstanding. Because again, He's big enough to continue to lead in the direction that He wants to. His will is going to be followed through and going to be done in our lives. And as long as we're open to that, to the goodness and the love and the joy and the peace of that, then He's going to find a way to bring us there.
yeah.
And we can just enjoy the ride together. So
What's number 2?
number 2 is the myth that house church communities are either a support group, oh, that's a support group, right? Or a branch Sabbath school.
Okay. So tell me about those.
Oh,
Do we not
man.
support each other?
No, there is very little support going on. If we did trust falls, everyone would just land up on the floor. No.
That's all not true.
That's all not true.
That's a myth as well. But
Yes.
so what's the difference?
So here's the difference between, and we actually had to work through this. We've had in the past and continue to have several people that are going through recovery of one way or another. And they're used to a support group. They're used to, whether it be AA, whether it be SA, or any of the other, addiction support groups out there. They're used to that. So when they've come to us and joined our community and we've, welcomed them in, they expected that same kind of thing. They expected to be able to come and to just share, whatever's going on in their life and their heart, and that's fine too. You can do that. But where we differ from a support group is that we are striving for a more true picture of who God is and a more true picture of who He says we are. So we're not, in our experience, if you come to our group and you express yourself and say some things that are not true according to gospel, according to God's story and what we're reading about what Jesus did, then we're not just going to let it sit there on the floor and go, hey, that's great, thanks for sharing your feelings. We want to support you, and we also, and part of that support is to confront ideas that are not founded in the truth and grace of who God is.
In the walk that He allows
Yeah.
us to take.
Correct. And we're not saying that there's a Jesus Band-Aid. We're not saying that there's an easy way to get over this or that or whatever. But when it comes to certain beliefs that don't line up, we're going to gently try to, when we have permission from that person, we're going to try to show them a different way of looking, a different way of seeing but because of who Christ is, because of what He's done, this is who you really are, and this is the truth.
Yeah.
And what you're saying doesn't line up with that.
Yeah.
and try
We listened
to
to
help
a
with that.
song last week. You Say.
Okay.
I can't remember who sang it, but
I didn't say it, I can tell you that.
it was all about that struggle of, this is what I think in my head, this is what I've got going on, but you
Yeah.
say this
Yeah,
about me. It was very meaningful.
cool.
Yeah.
So, so we're not a support group. It's not just a support group, because this is about spiritual growth. It's about kingdom growth. It's about being who God created us to be and cruising into that amazing side of things.
Now, the other words you used are possibly foreign to some people.
Sure. Yes, you are
We're
correct.
not a branch Sabbath school. What is that?
Or a branch Sunday school, or basically, I don't even know if I have a good idea. So if you have that, you can help me out with that. But it's kind of like an offshoot of a
Just
group,
a study group.
Yeah, just a study group.
Basically.
A group of people that said, hey, let's get together and let's do a little study over here in my home. It's not that. So you could also say it's not a small group. In the term of this is what we do. We meet every Wednesday and we study. We're going through these books of the Bible and we have a little meal before, and for the next 12 weeks we're going to be doing this. It's not a study group. So we try to be very careful about the language that we use. And when we say house church community, we really mean that last word. It's really about community. The other two just kind of define this kind of community, that we happen to be based in homes and we do believe in living in community.
Yeah.
So okay, so let's continue to move forward.
Yep.
So what do you got for next?
Well, this was kind of similar. It's a church plant. Church plant means you're
don't even know what that is.
starting small. You're going to plant the seed.
Okay. Yep.
And you're going to grow big and end up in a church building.
Yes.
That our
because
goal is to one day have enough members,
yes.
donate enough money, and
Correct.
move into a church building.
Yes, I have had people tell me that. Because I come from my professional background. I was a youth pastor for 18 years. So I have, in the community we live in here in Nebraska, I have a lot of people that I still connect with. And I've had several people in these last several years say, okay, so when are you going to start renting a building? You know, are you big enough to start renting a building? Are you going to build a whole nother church? As far as when they say church, they're talking about a building, a structure.
That is
Yeah.
strictly for church
Yep.
services
Yep.
and
Yep.
church ministry.
Exactly.
and-
Yeah.
yeah. We
So
have
this
talked
is a
about
myth.
some interesting ways to make gathering places, but not
Correct.
about a church building.
So if this is a myth, tell
Yeah.
me how this is.
So
What's the reality?
the reality is that when we have too many people to fit in your living room, we multiply. We don't divide, we multiply.
Yep. Again, very careful with the language.
Yes. And we had it for a while in my home and your home.
Yep.
And then people kind of shifted and moved, and then we came
Attrition.
back together
Yep.
and learned some things through that whole process. But the goal is to multiply. The goal,
To have
the
many of
goal
these little
isn't-
pockets
yeah,
everywhere.
to not take it into a big church building
Yeah.
at any time.
Rather, it's to move into neighborhoods all over, wherever we are, wherever our members are. The hope, ultimately, the ideal would be that each person would be able to have that at some point. And we know that's not a reality. Some people just aren't able to. Some people, it's just not where they're at right now. But for to have that influence, that kingdom influence,
Wherever you're at.
wherever you're at and everywhere you go, and kind of multiply that way. So, yeah. Okay.
Okay.
What about the myth that you could do this as a ministry inside a church? Because I've also heard this one as
Yes,
well. Well,
I have too.
can't you just do that, as part of the church?
Isn't
Why
it-
did you have to leave the big church to
It's
do
an
this?
entirely different culture.
Yeah.
The culture oftentimes in the large church building is, I'm going to show up and someone's going to do this thing for me up front, and
Sure.
I'm going to go home and carry on with my life. And so it's an entirely different culture.
And it doesn't have to be. We're not saying it has to be. It's not saying that's everywhere, and everyone who continues to meet just in the bigger churches, that's all you do. That's not the truth, but that is the tendency. It's just kind of where things tend to fall into in that culture.
Yeah. So, and we do know of a few communities that are primarily missional, which is what we call this.
Sure.
It's a missional community, house church communities. Primarily house church community based and missional based, but they do come together once a week to
Sure.
celebrate what they're doing. So it's
Yep.
not that they have this big thing going on and one group over here is doing this house church ministry, or
Yeah.
that they have this house church meeting
Yeah.
in the church building or something.
Yep.
It's that they are all living on mission in community, and they're coming together to share their stories.
Spread around the city in different
Yeah.
neighborhoods, and then they come together. So it
Yeah.
starts there. It starts in the smaller community and comes to a big gathering rather than
Yeah,
a big
rather than
gathering
the other way around.
that has occasionally a small little offshoot of a community.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we'll talk about why this is important here shortly, because I
Yeah.
think that is important. The other myth that is out there for some is that house churches are a church bashing group. That we're about, talking down about what's going on down the street at the big church, and can you believe this and can you believe that, and kind of that negative idea that it's kind of a hotbed of negativity and people that have been hurt and wounded, and so they just kind of gather together like a divorce support group and talk about our ex-spouses.
So, truth and error. I'm going to put us on the spot because there are people, many, who have been hurt and injured and don't feel welcome, and that's why they come.
Correct.
However, that's not what we're about. That's not what we want to be about.
Yeah.
So they're welcome. Their hurts are welcome. And sometimes they have some working through to do, and that's all okay. But our focus is what we're for, not what we're against.
Yep.
And so, quite frankly, I oftentimes have no clue what's going on down the road anywhere because it doesn't matter. It's not what we're focused on.
Yeah.
So,
And
yeah.
I think we are blessed to have some individuals who kind of hold our feet to the fire every now and then and say, hey, what we're talking about is not what we're about anymore. It's about what we're against. And that's the beauty of having a group that values everyone's commitment and comments and that God can speak through people and bring us back into a focus. Because it's really easy when you've been hurt. It's really easy when you have this baggage to put it down and sometimes pick it right back up again and not even notice that you're
carrying it.
Yeah, that you're carrying it again, and oh man, I'm being negative and toxic again, and I don't need to be, because that's not where I am anymore. It's not who I am anymore. It's not what's going on. So it's good to be reminded by other people that can help us with that. So okay,
next
more?
one. We're so grateful that we have Shane with us. That's the myth.
Wait,
So
no.
I'll say it differently.
Well, yeah.
We're very happy to have Shane with us. But there are those that think that we would not be legitimate as a house church. We would not be safe to be out there, that we would go astray.
Yeah.
Were it not for you.
Man, they do not know me very well, do they?
Because Shane used to be a pastor, so
that
we
gives
have a pastor.
some way legitimacy.
We'll
Basically,
put that
it
in
means
the bear claw.
people look to me when it's time to pray. All the time.
That's hilarious.
Okay, let's just look to Shane. I think it's time to pray.
So that's the myth.
Yes.
The myth is we have to have Shane.
You have to have a pastor.
We do love having Shane, but he doesn't have to be a
Good thing it's
pastor.
my house.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
No, you don't have to have a pastor.
Yeah. Correct. You do need spiritual leadership.
Yep.
And that's true, all across the Bible is that. But as far as having that particular one person who everyone looks to for leadership, one person who everyone looks to for direction, one person who everyone looks to for the answers.
To interpret.
That's not
the Bible.
That's not in the Bible story. That's not in the gospel story.
Yeah.
We look to Jesus for all those things. And together, collectively, we hear his voice and he speaks down through us with that. So you don't have to have a particular skill set, gift set. You don't have to have that title or that education before you can, before you can be involved in a house church community. Now, that might be the case in the other church communities, in again, the big church, I can't think of a better word, where just the way they're set up, that they value that education and they value those kind of things that is needed in that culture and that community. But in house church community, this is not a smaller version of what happens down the street in the big building. This is something completely different. And so you can't just take that and miniaturize it into a living room and expect it to work, because it's really not going to. It's really going to be boring. It's really going to be stuffy. it's just not going to work. It's not going to be very much life, when it's just scrunched down into a living room. So we don't have to have that pastoral role. We do need to have that pastoral gift, and the gifting is a completely different thing.
And there
than
are
the
lots of
role.
other gifts
Yes,
too, besides
correct. Yep.
pastor.
And it's when you have all of those gifts, and we'll probably talk about that at some point. We'll talk about the APES, the 5 giftings that Paul talks about in Ephesians. In creating a healthy body, you need these 5 systems to work in a healthy body, to grow, and that's what we're to be, healthy and growing, and those kind of things. So, okay. We've talked about these. What do we got? Six myths. We've tried to bust these 6 myths. If you've had any questions, do you have any questions that people have asked? Come on, people, ask. We're here. Okay. Talk to me about, so what's the so what? I mean, and where's the gospel in, because we said that at the beginning. You said, I'm calling on you.
I know.
You said, hey, we're here to talk about
the gospel.
the good news
How
of
it's
God's story.
bigger.
Yep. So how does talking about these myths show us, or how have we learned about the bigger of the gospel through these myths?
So the gospel says, to each person, you are valuable. I want a relationship with you, one-on-one. It's not that we have to go through a go-between. And so House Church is more about each person developing their one-on-one connection. It definitely nurtures that growth of one-on-one connection. So all of this is saying, hey, no, don't rely on other people to, yes, walk in community with other people. But don't sit back and be dependent on other people to get for your spiritual growth. It's a one-on-one thing. God loves each one of us, and He wants a very personal relationship with each one of us. And that's where I've seen it fit in. It's the priesthood of all believers. We do several things that are a little bit unique in honor of that priesthood of all believers, and believe that each person has equal access to the throne.
And has equal opportunity to be involved. This is a very participatory kind of a thing. When Jesus died and the veil was torn, that whole system of having to have someone to do it for you was gone away with. And all the multi-sensory things that were there involved were now open for all of us to flood forward, to come boldly before the throne of God and to get involved. This is also, about this priesthood of all believers, this is a call to action, not a call to just sit back and watch, not a call to just come and sit and I'm going to listen to some good things and hopefully I'm going to become a better person by listening. This is come and try it on. Come and try it out. It's supposed to be like a laboratory where you can experience and experiment and fail, and we're there to love and to lift up and to move forward. It challenges us to get involved. You said that our spiritual journey is very personal. I also believe that it's not supposed to be private. I don't believe that it's supposed to be something that I have to keep to myself and I'm just going to sit here quietly, because I'm more prone to error and to having lopsided. I'm going to lean toward that which I like the most. Maybe I like a God of grace the most, and so I'm going to lean that way. But then that takes away this idea that God does have a holy standard and He wants me to live better. He wants me to live up to something more and to not settle for something less. Or maybe I lean toward, things that I feel like I can control, like rules and uniformity and those kind of things, but I shy away from the grace. Again, I'm becoming lopsided, and if it's just private, if it's something that I just do quietly back here and I listen to some words and find out how it plays into my mind, but I don't
Without
share.
speaking it out loud
Without getting it out loud, without
Yeah.
hearing what you have to say, without
Yeah.
being vulnerable in stepping out into that, then I'm cheating myself. Really, the benefit of this community that God has brought me into. And so here's my so what, who cares?
Okay.
My so what, who cares is that there's not just one way to live this out. That there's not just the big church building down the road, or just, my house, in Nowheresville in the neighborhood. God uses all of these things, and sometimes he uses them all in a row. Like, I went from the big church to the smaller thing. That was, and I don't deny that. That was a great part of my journey, and God is saying, hey, that's not the only part of the journey, though. There's not only one way. It's a continual growth. It's a continual revelation and opening up of who I am, and you don't have to be afraid of man, I hope I don't mess this up. Is it this or is it this? We're so binary in our thinking, that it's a yes or no,
Yes
it's
or
right
no,
or
yeah.
wrong, it's black or white. I think there are, I don't want to say shades of gray, but there are more options out there. When Jesus was asked by his disciples, they came up to him and said, hey, we just saw some people, down the street that were doing miracles in your name, but they're not with us. Should we go and tell them to stop? And he's like, why would you do that? They're doing good things in my name. Is there only one way to do it? No, there isn't. He gives me that idea that he's not a God who's limited to a particular time, a particular space, a particular method, a particular ritual. That he's so much bigger than that. Not even a God who's limited to a particular denomination, or just limited to, you have to be in a denomination. You have to be in this certain, I'm only found in these certain boundaries and limitations that you put on me. All of these things are man's way of trying to grapple with how big God is.
Yeah.
And how to reach out to him. I'm not saying that these are wrong, but these are really man-made. I mean, what we do in our morning gatherings on the weekend, we just made it up. There's nothing holy and inspired by it. It's just, hey, let's just try this because we think this is going to help us connect with God. The big church down the street is doing the same exact thing. Now, they may think, some people I know, because I have heard them say this, think that it has to be this way. It's ordained by God to be this way. It was made up by people that came over with Noah in the boat. It's been around for so long, but it's still made up. It's still man's attempt to try to reach out and to touch the hem of God and to grapple with God. But it's not the only way. There isn't just one way. We have such a bigger God who's open and available to everyone. So we hope that you find that as well. What do you have?
Sure.
Any closing words? I just said all of mine. I'm spent.
I know what he said. No, that was good. That was good. I guess the one thought that I hadn't really conveyed is that thought of the body of Christ. The not just priesthood of all believers, but that all are moving and acting for the good of the glory of God, and that doesn't mean all within one little group. It's those who believe on Christ, those who believe in Jesus.
I mean, you're saying that we're part of the body of Christ in my house,
Sure.
as much as the building on the street is part of the body of Christ in my house.
Well, the people in
the people, not the building. Yes, the people, and we're all, and there's only one body. There's not a body here and a body there. Jesus doesn't have multiple bodies or personalities. He has a body, and sometimes my body works in coordination with each other, and
sometimes you stumble.
Yep, correct. Yeah,
The muscles get weak.
So thanks so much for joining us, whether it be live or whether it be listening and watching later on. We do hope that you would share this. If you can think of some people that might benefit from this, that might find some answers or some freedom, or maybe that they're kind of searching and they'd love to, maybe this would help with them.
Yeah.
Again, please feel free to engage with us during the week. We do try to monitor the page and interact and engage, and some people have, and we thank you for that. Continue to do so. Continue to spread the word, and we're hoping that in some way that people see a bigger picture of who God is. So I'm Shane.
Sylvia, thanks. See you
See you
next
next week. 7 o'clock.